Well, today we'll be talking about fresh eschatology from a missional perspective and asking questions how to also read the book of Revelation transformatively. So some of the key words today to listen to are transformation, imagination, book of Revelation, and mission. First of all, transformation is not a small change. If we say we seek transformation, then we say we need a deep, widespread change into a new reality. Romans 12:2 talks about renewal of mind, something that impacts our entire identity. It's a fundamental reorientation. Transformation affects our beliefs, values, and assumptions. Other biblical terms that Bible uses for transformation are new birth or new creation. And in the book of Revelation, this is where the end goal is nothing less than the new heavens and a new earth. That's extensive transformation and a huge canvas to fill with God's future reality. Imagination is the necessary catalyst for transformation. It takes imagination to renovate the kitchen. How much more it takes to imagine a drug addict getting free from an addiction, or transform a violent neighborhood, or bring an armed conflict to an end. It takes an enormous amount of imagination to imagine a new heaven and a new earth, with all new structures and relationships and a life that belongs to all. All big tasks begin with hopeful imagination. However, they're usually born out of unbearable present, followed by courageous faith to move in that new direction. For Christians, that big hopeful imagination is the good news, that God's goal is to heal us, save us, and renew us. The idea of transformational mission is not new, but it has grown recently to become greater focus. In 1974, Lausanne Covenant used the word transformation rather sparingly. First, it was when speaking of Christian social responsibility, it said, "The salvation we claim should be transforming us in the totality of our personal and social responsibilities. Faith without works is dead." Also, on the section on the doctrine of kingdom, Lausanne Covenant reminds us that Apostle Paul commanded Romans to be transformed, Romans 12:2 kind of way, and told Corinthians that we are being transformed. And finally, under the section about evangelism and culture, the Covenant expresses that churches must seek to transform and enrich culture, all for the glory of God. So, as we now prepare for Lausanne 4 in September 2024, the idea of transformation is being heard even more as we talk about it as more central. So, transformation of ourselves into image and likeness of Christ should be the life goal of every Christian personally, and church as a community exists for transformation of the world. So it's very vital to ask, what should be the direction of that transformation? We should envision what shall become. And we definitely think of transformation biblically. Where should we go to gain a vision of transformation for Christian mission? I believe that the book of Revelation has given the church a very good guide in which way to transform. We need to study what this new reality should look like. However, when even David Bosch, when he was laying a foundation for his monumental book, Transforming Mission, in 1991, he couldn't think of using Revelation. He extensively used Matthew, Luke, Acts, and Paul. However, in the index of scriptures, we only see Revelation used twice. So it raises a bit of a question, why don't others see Revelation as an obvious place to go to search ideas and transformation? Or why Revelation is not treated as a missionary source document? So I think that Revelation is very suitable. However, there might be some obstacles why some shy away from bringing Revelation into that conversation on missions. So today I'd like to present 5 different misunderstandings or obstacles that have perhaps been a reason why we don't use Revelation as much as we should. First of all, Revelation appears to give the final outcomes in the black and white fatalistic terms, which is unhelpful for speaking about transformation. Revelation speaks of those whose names are written in the book of life and those who are thrown in a lake of fire. There is little room between the two. And the whore of Babylon, in Revelation 18:19, does not become the bride New Jerusalem. They always remain separate and contrasting figures. However, I wonder whether we read Revelation, when we read Revelation, we perhaps miss a few things. We should also take notice how this book, very black and white book, delays the final judgment. Every time when you have a sequence of seals or trumpets or bowls of wrath, and you expect there to be 7 of them, every time you get to 7th, you get a new set of sequence. So that delays the end and that finality. Also, it's a book that ends with an invitation, come, with the bride and the Spirit to say, come, and everybody should come. This is an invitation to join in the community in transformation. So the reader, while faced with such extreme images as the whore and the bride, at the same time is pressed to make a personal choice. Revelation's rhetoric, and that's my second point, is explosive. It's political and thus vulnerable to unethical interpretations. And those interpretations can range from overly great optimism about world progress to fanaticism about the nearing collapse of the world. Apocalypse has sadly been used to justify some extreme positions. It's been the basis to justify violent climate activism and to justify resignation from material world. It has been used to back up Zionism and to justify anti-Semitism. It has been viewed as anti-woman. There are many obstacles, and some would rather avoid the book which causes so much controversy. Well, I have written elsewhere to show how Revelation is not anti-woman and how we sometimes miss the point. However, we should handle Revelation with appropriate caution, though we should never avoid. And never ever should any scripture be used as a donkey before our wagon, that is, before our agenda. Third point, Revelation 20, the famous passage on the millennium, with its various interpretations, pre, post, and amillennialism, divides Christians into camps. It sets up to discuss time as if the chronology was the most important takeaway from Revelation. Such discussions largely miss the point, as they crowd out other valuable topics that emerge from Revelation and limit the missiological conversation. They sidetrack us on the field of hermeneutics. Fourth obstacle I see is popular interpretations that include rapture, remove church from the scene. And those interpretations are based on rather superficial readings that the word church does not appear past Revelation 4. Therefore, church is reduced to spectators of the sufferings of this world instead of the community that sets an example of how suffering endurance could lead to redemption. Such readings fail to see church behind figurative imagery, such as the 2 witnesses who resist the beast in Revelation 11, or the woman in the wilderness preserved by God in a war with dragon, Revelation 12. So literalist hermeneutic narrows our discussions. We lack not just imagination to interpret biblical story, but we also lose sight of the missional role of the church in God's plan and amidst of the world suffering under sin and judgment. Church's role and responsibility to witness, worship, and endure in suffering from, in, and with the world are left out, and these are not some peripherals but central parts of the Revelation message. Finally, we sometimes feel we're not competent to discuss a book that is so complex. And that's one obstacle I can actually respect. Yes, we should be cautious with things we maybe do not know particularly well. However, today I would like to invite you to a journey and wish to provide some examples how Revelation's narrative expands our vision and is truly transformative. And today I'm offering a bit of a more intuitive reading rather than strict exegesis. While having studied this book long and faithfully, over the course of many courses of my life, I think that this type of reading It seeks to be biblical, but it also seeks to engage emotionally. I invite you to ask questions that you maybe typically have not asked. What do you truly see, hear, and feel? How does this vision transform? The first point I'd like to make is Revelation 21, 3-5. The point is about presence and absence. Revelation ends well. Presence of God is there, and also absence of evil. Canonical narrative that started in Genesis with a short depiction of God's good and perfect creation, quickly followed by the fall, culminates with Revelation 21:3b, a vision of the presence of God with creation. See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. God's presence is a powerful part of Christian eschatology. It is the motivating promise of the Great Commission in Matthew 28. And this experience of God's eternal love is the ultimate goal of Revelation, in Revelation 21, where John uses marriage imagery to convey that. So whatever fresh eschatology I am providing today, I would like to affirm that at the core of eschatology is God's love. Alongside with that powerful reminder of presence, in the very next verse, Revelation 21:4, there is focus on what is absent from the presence of God. And I quote, "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away." In fact, the first things will become former things and do not belong. The focal point in Revelation is on the perfect city described in Revelation 21 and the fruitful garden in Revelation 22. So indeed, Bible ends well. Ends well so much that it's even better than the beginning of the Bible was. Yet, somehow within those stories, in order to get there, it is important for us to remember and be reminded of the absence of the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars. Their place will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death, Revelation 21:8. Also of those who are left outside the great city and God's presence. There are dogs, sorcerers, sexually immoral, murderers, idolaters, everyone who loves and practices falsehood, 22:15. So question is, that absence of certain things from the future world is just as important than reminder of God's presence. Perhaps because this is where we live at this particular moment. So it is important that John is giving us hope for something new, and he's expanding our mind to accept that transformation. And he's calling us not to just think and imagine the presence of God, but also to imagine a world without certain things. So our challenge is, can we imagine the world without? I suggest that there are things that we put up with every day that do not belong to the perfect world, but belong to the fallenness of this world. And many of those things have become so much part of the fabric of our lives that we cannot even imagine a world without them. And there's a popular saying that goes, we must accept what we cannot change. Or should we stretch our capacity to dream to make a difference? The challenge is something that seems impossible at first. And there are impossible conflicts and circumstances. If I think of the world with Russia-Ukraine war, with Palestine-Israel conflict, it is impossible, or nearly impossible, to dream of a world without violence. Yet, that is the picture to which we are called. It will all end well. Somehow it will all work out. Because according to Scripture, love is eternal. Death is temporary reality. What are the implications of that? Even more than absence of death, also the seer sees a glamorous city without disease, without tears and pain. And those final chapters portray also no division between people, even rural and urban life. One does not know where garden ends and city begins. There's harmony in there. The world without war, without conflict, racism, sexism, and slavery. We confess, in our current condition, we struggle to even imagine a world without sibling rivalry or school bullying, much less a world without war. Yet we must imagine. Psychologists have even shown that one of the ways how people can elevate higher and out from their depression or problems is a technique that uses imagination. A person in the middle of their difficulties is called to imagine the most positive, most beautiful outcomes, even when they are completely unrealistic. This act of visualizing in the eye of the mind has shown a real-life effect of combating not just depression in their life, but also leading to positive action and change in reality. So there's amazing power in imagination. And if we think about John, the author of Revelation, who wrote while he was exiled from the civilized world, separated from his community, faced with uncertainty, it is not in some ideal situation where he's writing about the world without tears, pains, and death, but from suffering on the island of Patmos. So it is out of imperfect circumstances that he envisions a city that is perfectly in order, perfectly symmetrical. It is an amazing act of imagination, and it must have provided him with hope and comfort. As Christians, a lot of this positive view of future we have expressed in our creeds as well. Apostolic Creed confesses that we believe in life eternal. And in Revelation, it's fleshed out as being even well physically and mentally and delivered from bondage of sin and death. So we should definitely have a lot more hope for someone who is struggling with alcoholism, drug addiction, or depression. Revelation 21 speaks of New Jerusalem and describes it as a perfect city with golden streets. And yet, we have difficulties to even imagine our home alive without garbage on both sides of the roads. Let's talk trash for a moment. Let's talk about possibilities for a world without trash. Trash on streets is a sign of dysfunction. Nobody likes trash. Poverty, conflicts, and hopelessness leave their mark. The lives and communities in turmoil lack the energy needed to achieve harmony. Corrupt and compromised politicians lack organization to solve problems and resources to provide services. So societies slip into chaos and the problems tend to snowball. People no longer care. And sometimes it becomes a generational issue. A few years ago, I visited a beautiful house in India. And that house stood next door to another very beautiful house. Those houses were kept clean. Every morning somebody took a broom and swept every speck of dust off the floor. Yet between those two houses, the empty lot there was garbage piled up. It was sad. And I was talking on the balcony, looking down to the owner of the house, whether he could talk to the other owner and they could maybe clean it up and make a nice garden for the children to play. Well, I got a look. The owner explained to me how impossible this is, how it goes back to many reasons and caste system and many different held social beliefs in India, how it is so impossible to pick up someone's trash. As I was listening, another basket of garbage was tossed down from the balcony just above my head. Reality can hit hard sometimes. And systemic change is difficult because it involves so many people whose hope has been lost and whose imagination needs to be transformed. Yet, we do not wish to live in a heap of garbage. Therefore, change is needed. In 2006, someone in Estonia, a small country, initiated an event known as the World Cleanup Day. And that event has become a worldwide movement today of picking up garbage. So what started with one person picking up first piece of trash and asking others to do so has now become a worldwide movement. Millions of tons of garbage have been removed by volunteers from streets, woods, waters every year, making a great deal of difference. And And that is different to all of our way of life. Even cigarette stump, when thrown on a street, ends up in a waterway, eaten by fish, eaten by your children, who will end up with diseases. So it's a systemic change, but starting that first act of hope can lead to huge transformation. I can say also my country in the last 30 years of freedom has cleaned out a lot of trash left there from the Soviet Union and occupation. Cleanliness, however, leads to better environment, but also a greater harmony, respect, and prosperity. Improved environment is just one aspect of God's transformative work. We can look at some others. And let's go to Bible now, to chapter 9 of Revelation. And that's probably one of the craziest scriptures in the Bible. I would say somebody reading Revelation from all the way up to chapter 8, it looks like a decent book. Chapter 9 goes crazy. John sees an army of locusts. Locusts were a natural phenomena which periodically devastated crops and often that devastation led to famine, so it was used by prophets as a sign of judgment. Very scary, but still natural. However, in Revelation 9, we see locusts which are utterly unnatural. They're described like a cavalry. They have human characteristics, but also animal features, like scorpion tails. They have wings and scales. They're hellish, and they respond to their king called Destroyer. They come from deep, dark places, released by a suspicious angel. In this story, the locusts destroy not crops, but people. The story emphasizes that their purpose is to torture, not to kill. And people wish to die for the torment. It's even hard to imagine how John, a respected elder, presumably a stable man, produced such disturbing imagery. And you would expect imagery like this come from someone in a drug addiction mind. However, I think John feels a need to describe the nature of evil, and he needs to unbalance the reader to understand how painful the current reality is. There is temptation to judge the people in the book of Revelation who are experiencing suffering or torture in this case. But there is mystery here. Could these hellish creatures who do not cause physical harm stand in for psychological pain, despair, anxiety, depression? When unnatural things rise from deep dark, we are afraid to even call them by name. We hide from others the diagnosis of depression. We keep a secrecy, bipolarism. Yet, emotional pain is common, experienced by many, and many would trade that pain for any kind of physical pain instead. It feels so unnatural. One of the implications of this passage is that church should have compassion for all, including those in despair. John has us to witness people's pain, observe their suffering and torment, not so that we would feel self-righteous, but because it is hard to watch someone in pain. Have you ever tried to sit with someone deeply depressed? You would do that for a close friend, but that is not easy. We are so tempted to judge, think that they somehow deserve it. And if you look at verse 9:21, you might just think that perhaps they are idolaters, murderers, aren't they? For such interpretation would give us even a measure of control, and hence protection from the hellish creatures for ourselves. But does it really make us feel better? And is it really a good interpretation? Can we feel compassion instead? Text shows that what these people have, their idols, is insufficient to provide protection. Have they not heard of the seal in Revelation 7 that could protect them from harm? And by the way, no, these people are not marked with the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is not spoken of until Revelation 13, 16 to 18. But if not, who should then lead them to this saving knowledge? Suffering in our fallenness in the fallen world is common. but does not lead to salvation. Christian witness is needed for that. And in chapters 10 and 11, in chapters 10 we see John himself challenged into prophetic role. But in chapter 11 we see church together being called to Christ-like witness, mission and suffering. This, however, has results. In Revelation 11, death and destruction of the two witnesses lead to repentance. Bystander church, in Revelation 9, observing torment does nothing to transform. In Revelation 9:21, they did not repent, text says. But suffering church, facing himself down in the face of various beasts and all sorts of anxiety, 11:7, makes an impression, leading to transformation. So we are told these people will worship God of heaven. It's a passing episode, but I believe it's an important one. This is mystery. I take hope from the absence of such hellish creatures in God's new creation, but also a lesson from how we should choose to respond with compassion, the same compassion that God has for us. Another evil picture in the book of Revelation, a picture portraying what will no longer be, thankfully, at the end, is the image of the beasts. There is actually 3 of them, the sea beast, the earth beast, and the dragon. And they cause chaos and suffering in the story. And they're absent when we reach the end. The beasts are creatures that are monsters that shouldn't exist and will not exist in God's good world. They are unnatural in their whole makeup. 13:1, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like bear's feet, its mouth was like a lion's mouth. The beasts have a very confusing makeup. They have multiple heads. Who on earth could think of and be of right mind if they have many heads? Think of oppressive states or oversized organizations with questionable agendas. Think about places where you go and you ask, who's in charge here? And nobody knows. Or who's responsible? Nobody is. And who cares? Nobody does. They're not accountable. They are not sane. They are not logical. We're told the beasts boast, they speak lies and they blaspheme. There is no truth in them. They only use and abuse. The key feature seems to be their talk, their mouth, their blasphemy. Propaganda and deceit are key weapons of manipulative politicians and oppressive powers. There's no consistency, no logic. The rest of us are spending our days trying to figure them out and spending useless time. But that's the point. There is no moral or coherent nature. They are monsters. They shouldn't exist. Like war, it's irrational. The violence and randomness that happens in war, the boundaries crossed, and things completely, our values trampled down. It's random. It's bad. It's without logic. Russia's bombing of a maternity hospital in Mariupol, there is no logic. Or the children's hospital in Kyiv. Those are just recent acts in Ukraine of awful violence against the young and old and vulnerable. Same way, things happening in Gaza by Hamas as well as by Israel. The violence makes no sense. And that largely is the point. The nature of evil is chaotic, and chaos was the first force that God had to conquer in order to create the beautiful world. So, the comfortable message is, these do not belong to God's future world. And perhaps, and Revelation 20 very clearly says, Lamb conquers, and the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are cast into the lake of fire. They will be no more. And all deceit and deceitful powers are going to be no more. That is a hopeful message. That is how John wants us to live our current lives with that knowledge. We also see that at the end, Christians are standing, worshipping and witnessing. And somehow, that which we do every single day has an impact at the end, even perhaps even the outcome of the heavenly war. Our mission is always going to be much more impactful when we overcome our fatalistic thinking that we have nothing, there's nothing that depends on us, so things are predetermined. Nothing can be done with environment, nothing can be done with human suffering, either psychological or physical, some conditions never change. No, John wants us to come out of that thinking. Church, while being aware of the very real presence of evil in this world, when it's living and acting in light of the future hope, makes a huge difference. And Christian truthful witness, worship, and presence in this world makes all the difference at the end. Therefore, I suggest boldly that Revelation offers a transforming vision and a much greater scope of hope. It is letting us know that love is eternal and evil temporary in all its forms. Thank you very much. God bless you.